It's Monday, and you know what that means. Another Joe Lum album review. Yeah. This week I'm going to be covering Slayer's third album, Rain in Blood. When you're done watching this video, you can watch past album review episodes, as the playlist is in the description box. Let's not waste any time, let's get down to business. Rain in Blood is Slayer's third studio outing. Released on October 20th, 1986 by Def Jam Recordings, the album was the band's first collaboration with producer Rick Rubin, whose input helped the band's sound evolve. The release date of the album was delayed because of concerns regarding the lyrical subject matter of the opening track, Angel of Death, which refers to Joseph Mengele and describes acts such as human experimentation that he committed at the Auschwitz concentration camp. The band's members stated that they did not condone Nazism and were merely interested in the subject. Rain in Blood would be well received by both critics and fans, and was responsible for bringing Slayer to the attention of a mainstream metal audience. Today, it is often mentioned among the greatest heavy metal records ever. So let's get to the backstory behind this classic thrash metal record. Following the positive reception Slayer's previous album, Hell Awaits, had received, the band's producer and manager Brian Slagel realized the band were in a position to hit the big time with their next release. Slagel negotiated with several record labels. Among them was Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons' Def Jam Recordings. However, Slagel was reluctant to have the band signed to what was, at the time, primarily a hip-hop label. Drummer Dave Lombardo was made aware of Rubin's interest, and he initiated contact with the producer. However, Slayer's remaining members were apprehensive of leaving Metal Blade Records, with whom they were already under contract. Lombardo contacted Columbia Records, which was Def Jam's distributor, and managed to get in touch with Rubin, who, along with photographer Glenn E. Friedman, agreed to attend one of the band's concerts. Friedman had produced Suicidal Tendencies' self-titled debut, in which Slayer's singer Tom Araya made a guest appearance in the music video for the album single Institutionalized. Pushing Suicidal Tendencies singer Mike Moore, around this time Rubin asked Friedman if he knew Slayer. Guitarist Jeff Hanneman was surprised by Rubin's interest in the band and was impressed by his work with the hip-hop acts Run DMC and LL Cool J. During a visit by Slagel to a European music convention, Rubin spoke with the band directly and persuaded them to sign with Def Jam. Slagel paid a personal tribute to Rubin and said that Rubin was the most passionate of all label representatives the band were in negotiations with. Following the agreement, Friedman brought the band members to Seattle for 2 days of publicity shots, possible record shots, and photos for a tour book. Rubin felt no good photos of the band had been taken before that point. One of the points was used on the back cover of the band's 1988 album, South of Heaven. The recording for what would be Rain in Blood took place at Hit City West in Los Angeles between January and March of 1986, with Rubin producing and Andy Wallace engineering. The album was the label boss's first professional experience with heavy metal, and his fresh perspective led to a drastic makeover of the Slayer sound. Steve Huey of AllMusic believed Rubin drew tighter and faster songs from the band and delivered cleanly produced sound that contrasted sharply with their previous recordings, Show No Mercy and Hell Awaits. This resulted in drastic changes to Slayer's sound and changed audiences' perception of the band. Araya has since stated the two previous albums were not up to par production-wise. Kerry King later remarked, "It was like, wow, you can hear everything, and those guys aren't playing fast. Those notes are on time." According to Tom Araya, it was Hanneman's idea to add the scream for the introduction in Angel of Death. Araya did take several takes, but ended up using the first one. Hanneman later admitted that while the band was listening to Metallica and Megadeth at the time, they were finding the repetition of guitar riffs tiring. He said, if we do a verse 2 or 3 times, we're already bored with it. So we weren't trying to make the song shorter. That's just what we weren't into, which resulted in the album's short duration of 29 minutes. The band realized the album's runtime only when they were finishing up with its mixing it with engineer Andy Wallace. The band weren't sure whether they would have to hit the studio to create more material or just leave it. So they turned to Rubin. His only reply was that it had 10 songs, verses, chorus, and leads, and that's what constituted an album. He didn't have any issue with it. Araya told Metal Hammer. King had stated while hour-long records seemed to be the trend, you could lose this part. You could cut this song completely and make a much more intense record, which is what we were all about. When the record was completed, the band met with Rubin, who asked, do you realize how short it is? Slayer members looked at each other and replied, so what? The entire album was on one side of a cassette. King stated that it was neat, as you could listen to it, flip it over, and play it again. The music is abrasive and faster than previous releases, helping to narrow the gap between thrash metal and its predecessor, hardcore punk, and is played at an average of 220 beats per minute. The lyrical themes for Rain and Blood became a topic of controversy when Def Jam's distributor Columbia Records refused to distribute the album due to the song Angel of Death. Because of its setting and description of the Holocaust, the album was eventually distributed by Geffen Records, but due to the controversy, it did not appear on Geffen's release schedule, and the Geffen logo was not put on the record. For the album, Slayer decided to abandon much of their earlier satanic themes explored on the previous record, Hell Awaits, and write about issues that were more on a street level. Rain and Blood's lyrics include death, religion, insanity, and murder, while the lead track, Angel of Death, details human experiments conducted by Auschwitz concentration camp member Joseph Mengele, who was dubbed the Angel of Death by inmates. The song led to accusations of Nazi sympathizing and racism, which have followed Slayer throughout their career. Go ahead with the track listing. Most of the lyrics were written by Jeff Hanneman and Kerry King, as Angel of Death kicks off the record in 4:51. Piece by Piece, written by Kerry King, clocks in at 2:02. Necrophobic clocks in at 1:40. Altar of Sacrifice clocks in at 2:50. Jesus Saves clocks in at 2:54. Criminally Insane clocks in at 2:23. Reborn clocks in at 2:11. Epidemic clocks in at 2:23. Postmortem clocks in at 3:27. And the album closer, Raining Blood, that's R-A-I-N-I-N-G, Blood, clocks in at 4:14. Now in the 1998 reissue bonus tracks, Aggressive Perfector clocks in at 2:30, and a remix of Criminally Insane clocks in at 3:18. Even though it received no radio airplay, Rain and Blood was the band's first release to enter the Billboard 200, where it debuted at number 127, and attained its peak position of 94 in its 6th week. The album also reached number 47 on the UK album charts, and on November 20th, 1992, it was certified gold in the US. 6 years after its release. Can you believe that? Rain and Blood was critically acclaimed by the underground and mainstream music press. Reviewing for AllMusic, Steve Huey awarded the album 5 out of 5, describing it a stone cold classic. Stylist magazine critic Clay Jarvis awarded the album an A+ grade, calling it a genre definer, as well as the greatest metal album of all time. Kerrang! Magazine described it as the heaviest album of all time, and listed it at number 27 among the 100 greatest heavy metal albums of all time. Metal Hammer Magazine named it the best metal album of the last 20 years in 2006. Q Magazine ranked Rain and Blood among their list of the 50 heaviest albums of all time, and Spin Magazine ranked the album number 67 on their list of 100 greatest albums, 1985 to 2005. Critic Chad Bauer stated 1986's Rain and Blood is probably the best thrash metal album ever recorded. In August of 2014, Revolver placed the album on its 14 thrash metal albums you need to own list. In 2017, it was ranked 6th on Rolling Stone's list of 100 greatest metal albums of all time. The legacy of Rain and Blood is regarded by critics as one of the most influential and extreme thrash metal albums. In its greatest metal bands of all time poll, MTV praised Slayer's downtuned rhythms, infectious guitar licks, graphically violent lyrics, and grisly artwork, which they stated set the standards for a dozen of emergent thrash bands. While Slayer's music was directly responsible for the rise of death metal, MTV described Rain and Blood as the essential listening, and the album was ranked number 7 on IGM's top 25 most influential metal albums. My overall rating for Rain and Blood has to be 60 out of 100. Even though I never listened to a lot of the other songs on Rain and Blood, like Postmortem or Altar of Sacrifice or Jesus Saves, underrated gems. The only two songs that were noted and were the most standout were Angel of Death and Raining Blood. I have yet to listen to Necrophobic, Altar of Sacrifice, Jesus Saves, and Criminally Insane, along with Postmortem. But other than that, it was still a great thrash metal album nonetheless.
Don't